Ready?
Whenever you are, you're in charge.
Good evening. Let's get the show on the road here. March 20th, 2019, 6 p.m. We will convene meeting, and could we all stand for a Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comments. Is there anyone wishing to address the board? Things not listed on the agenda. Is there anyone wishing to come to the podium? Last time. All right. We're going to start out on a very good note tonight. I'm going to say some very nice things about a very nice person. And when I first met her, I didn't know if she was going to be nice to me or not. But she immediately put me in my place. And says, yes, and said, "This is how it is." Yes, ma'am. But it is a great award that we're going to give to the Vice Chair, Julie Pierce, because this is a long time, for over 25 years of service to this board. That's, to me, that's a milestone. And there's a quote in here. I didn't make it up, but I think it's pretty cool. You started when you were a teenager. So, but it says here she's been a leader and a driving force for many, many things here. The Caldecott Tunnel, 4-4, the modernization and widening of Highway 4. These are all things that she's been, that actively had something to do with, and it's for the betterment of the county. And that's what she has always stood for. I noticed that when Julie takes it on, it's for everyone. It's not just for Clayton or her area of the town. I tried to get her to go that way, but she wouldn't do it for me. Building the Richmond Parkway, and pretty much the entire extension of BART beyond North Concord, Martinez Station to Bay Point, Pittsburgh. And I think everyone on this board, and it says here, are very proud to call you a colleague and a friend. And I don't know how much more we can say. We really do thank you for what you've done. And that's what happens to good people. The more you do, the more people ask of you to do. But you've done it, and you've done it in style. And this is gorgeous. I want one of these myself. But I probably won't be here for over 25 years. But if anybody hasn't seen this, it is just absolutely beautiful. Here you go. Isn't that pretty?
That's awesome.
They misspelled transportation.
They did?
Oh, no, they
No,
didn't.
they didn't.
All right, you got to stand up. You got to stand up. You want to take it out?
He's
I'm afraid to
take.
break it. This thing is,
It's heavy.
it's heavy.
It's crystal.
Look at that.
That's beautiful. That's cool.
Isn't that pretty?
That is really cool. I'm going to put it right up here so I can look at it.
No, set it up there where we can knock
So
it
where
over.
we can knock it off.
Yeah, set it up there where we can sit. There we go. Wow.
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 Thank you.
You're welcome.
You are wonderful.
Very nice.
I didn't do it. Your colleagues did this.
That was totally unexpected. Totally unexpected. I appreciate it very much. And, you know, it doesn't feel like that long, but I love this board. It's the most collegial board I sit on. We get lots of really good stuff done together. We know how to play well together. We know how to take turns. We all learned that in kindergarten, and we actually do it. So it's just really exciting, and we've got a lot of projects ahead of us. We've got a lot more on our plate, and I'm looking forward to taking it all on. So thank you, thank you, thank you all, and look forward to continuing to work with all of you. This is really super.
And should I say you're looking forward to the next 25?
Probably not that long. Probably not that long. But
All right.
we'll see where it goes.
It
But
couldn't happen.
thank you, thank you.
Couldn't happen to nicer people.
Thank you.
We'll move into approval of minutes. We have a first and a second. Did you get it, Tarian? All right. We'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Consent calendar?
Approval.
First?
Second.
Second. Whoever you want to choose. We'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. End of consent. Moving right into regular agenda items. Approval of, go to 4A9, approval of fiscal year 2018-19 mid-year budget for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, Congestion Management Agency, and Mr. Bryan.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners, and congratulations, Ms. Pierce. What a wonderful trophy. We're going to have to adjust the budget for that one. No. Before you tonight is the proposed mid-year budget. What we do is I meet with all of the project members, the planning members, the programming members, and everybody goes through and takes a look at our projections that we had, that we started on last April, May, and finished up and brought to you guys in June of 2018. And as we look at this, we had a sales tax study done. It looks like our sales tax are supposed to remain flat, so we didn't make any adjustments to the sales tax revenues there. Our federal, state, and local revenues, we have some funds moving in between and some timing and some allocations being done. The net change is about $1.8 million. It's not a loss of any revenues. It's just a timing of the projects and final billing. And as we look at the investment and other income, that's an increase of about $800,000. The large increase there is related to the increase in the market value as we hold our investments closer to maturity. The market value has increased in the past few fiscal years. We've had some increases in the U.S. Treasury rates, which caused the market value for us to decrease, and we report all of our finances on a market value basis. So there's the increase there. The bond proceeds shows a decrease of about $5 million. Again, that's due to the timing of the CIP projects. And the other sources is a decrease to result in the timing of all the projects and programs and special projects we have within the individual cities. The other sources is funds that are earmarked for projects in future years. As we can see, the project section sees the biggest decrease of about $25 million. That's pretty much typical for the authority. We come in with an aggressive budget hoping to get all of our projects done. Depending on environmental and timing and weather, we can see some delays. The programs department saw a slight decrease of about $1.3 million. Planning stayed just about the same. Administrative section, you can see an increase of about $1 million. As you recall, a couple months ago we were before you and we paid off about $1.2 million of our unfunded liability. And the debt service, due to the refinance of the bonds in August of 2018, reflect new debt service schedules. So again, this is just a little snapshot of the sales tax revenues over the prior 4 fiscal years, what we're budgeting for this year, which is $91.1 million. And I added the projected estimate for next year is going to be about $92 million. We'll revise that in another couple months when we get some more additional information. Right here is a great snapshot of our sales tax. What we try and do is take a look year to year where some of the changes in the major industry groups are there. You can see that for the 2018 calendar year versus the 2017, we saw about a 5.4% increase in there. You can see that our largest group is general consumer goods, and that saw about a 5.1% increase. There is another large increase in fuel and service stations related to the higher fuel costs. And then we take a look at our July to December 2018 versus the prior fiscal year, and you can see we're about 3.4% higher. We're expecting to see a little bit lower numbers in the second 2 quarters of this fiscal year. Our capital projects, we had discussed the federal, state, and local revenue. This is just the individualized funding source, and you can see the changes there. The RM2 funding saw a decrease again. That's related to the timing of the projects. And the SHOP and SLP are part of the 684 interchange. And then the ECRFA, we saw a decrease of about $4.7 million based off of the timing of our application for the ECRFA funds. And I'll show on another slide how all of these funds are allocated to the individual project categories. The planning, CMA, and PDA funding, we also get about $1.2 million in federal surface transportation funds to help fund the CMA planning and programming studies. The local agencies have a contribution earmarked to be about $265,000. Typically, we don't utilize the full budget in the CMA, and it usually comes in closer to about $200,000. The motor vehicle registration tax is about $1.7 million, and the State Transportation Agency grant for the Go-Menum Station is going to be about $1.9 million, and we'll also have about a $270,000 contribution from Go-Menum to pay for staff salaries. So the Measure J capital projects are listed here. The Caldecott Tunnel all the way through the Richmond Parkway, which is our CIP categories, is about $86.7 million. And then the $32 million that we had mentioned, $34 million, is allocated for each of these individual projects. You can see the largest amount of funds is coming for the I-680 SR4 interchange improvements. And then as you look at the I-80 corridor, you can see a negative of about $3.9 million. That's the authority collecting funds that were billed for capital construction that we paid for in the prior fiscal year, just getting caught up and cleaning up that project. The capital project changes, again, this is the individualized changes for all of the capital projects. You can see the Caldecott Tunnel, fourth bore, we have about a $6.2 million decrease. We are currently working with Caltrans to discuss some cost overruns. I believe that'll be reconciled and brought back to you next fiscal year. The authority has some employees working on that particular piece. The SR4 bypass elements, we saw a decrease of about $5 million based off of the timing for the Balfour project. We also have the I-680 SR4 interchange are decreasing of about $9.4 million. Again, it's due to the timing of getting the project started. Overall, there's a decrease of about $22 million. Our administration is up $1.1 million. As we discussed, we're contributing about $1.2 million to CalPERS. Salaries and benefits are $651,000 and represent about 0.72% of the 1% limitation. Historically, we range anywhere about 0.75, 76, 78, so we're right on par with that. And then we're also going to do a reduction of about $90,000 for the removal of a prior budgeted furniture upgrade. And the authority-wide pension and post-employment and health insurance and workers' comp rates are down just a little bit due to the vacant positions and transitions we've had this year. The programs department is $62 million. We have a $1.3 million reduction, and that's just the timing of the programs that we're doing and the allocations that we do to the individual cities. So for all of the money that we receive, we pay out about 90% during the year, the following fiscal year, and then we do a true up the following year on the final 10%. We also added the ferry service, which is about $2.2 million this year. And then we have the local streets and maintenance is typically around $18 million, and we're right on track with that as well. And again, the Go-Menum program is seeing some slight reductions based on some timing of work that they're doing out there, and it's being reduced $400,000. The planning department is just down $162,000. Again, that's due to the timing of some of the contracted services we do. And the debt service, as I stated earlier, is down about $1.3 million. And our principal is going to be $16.4 million, with our interest about $21.2 million. And our bond proceeds draw on the fiscal year is going to be about $53.5 million, and that'll leave us about $5 million for next year if we utilize all of the funds available. With that concludes my presentation.
Before we go in discussion with the board, for the public, is there anyone wishing to address the board at this time? All right, we'll open it up for discussion with the board. Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One request and one question, and this is overall. In the future on budget, on any slides, could you put a number in the bottom right-hand corner? Because that helps to be able to refer to which slide. The question I have is on the sales tax point of sales transactions. Thank you for the report, very comprehensive. On fuel and service stations, you said, I think I heard you say that was due to an increase in gas prices. Because I've been watching, they don't seem to have risen that much, then they've gone back down. Could it also be due to the fact that people are using more gas, or is there any way to tell?
Unfortunately, we don't get that information. We don't get the gallons price, but back in 2017, gas prices were slightly lower compared to 2018.
Overall, okay. Yeah, because I do know the IRS reimbursement rate did go up. But none of that is due to SB1, correct? The extra 12 cents on at the gas pump?
SB1 became effective.
Wasn't it effective a year ago, January? I just want to be real. That's a huge jump, and compared to everybody else, it's about double what the next highest, which is business and industry.
Yeah, I think it's we don't get the granular information to determine price per gallon, but gas has gone up since SB1 passed. Gas was here after the increase of 12 cents on gasoline and 20 cents on diesel. Now the gas prices are a little bit below, and I think it's consumption.
Oh, so it's sort of a balance.
Yeah.
So overall, that is due to an increase in fuel prices.
Prices, and also I think people are driving more.
Well, that's what I really wanted to get out there.
They're consuming more gasoline because of the additional.
Because they're doing more driving.
Yes.
Which we need to make sure people understand that because I'm a big proponent of supporting anything having to do with climate change and what have you. But again, as a member of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, when people come to us and complain that we're not doing anything, which is not true, it's always interesting to note that we still love our cars. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Just want to add, is it possible that they're using more gasoline because they're sitting in traffic, not moving more?
They've been doing that for years. Randy, did you want to say? You had the light on.
Was that a question or was that a statement? Yeah, that's what I thought. So I don't have a response for that.
Oh, okay. Any other comment?
I just want to say,
Oh.
Brian, thanks. It's great that we have the confidence now in sales tax, since that is our real source of income. Our new consultant does a deep dive all the time, and getting almost monthly reports now is going to help us plan for the future. But as you heard today, the Fed, said for 1 year out, we're not going to raise interest rates. Why? Because the economy is dropping. And you've already see that. You're accounting for it in your budget. But I appreciate everything you're doing. You are very forward-thinking, and I think it's what helps keep this agency headed the right way. So with that, I would move the mid-year adjustment budget as presented.
Second.
I have a first. I have a second. Is there any more discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-1, public opinion research update.
Good evening, Commissioners.
At last month's meeting, the board approved public opinion research in the form of focus groups, and we are in the process of planning those sessions now based on your comments from the last meeting, and anticipate hosting a total of 5 focus groups around the second week of April. The staff report indicates that the plan is to conduct a focus group with younger residents across the county, likely in an online format, and 4 in-person focus groups concentrated in 2 areas of the county. Eastern Contra Costa County, where the authority recently completed about $1 billion in transportation improvements, and the La Miranda and Tri-Valley area, which will be impacted by substantial improvements the authority plans to make as part of the Innovate 680 program, bringing new traffic technology and traffic management techniques to that corridor. These are also 2 areas that gave the last transportation expenditure plan an icy reception. These groups are being designed to help inform the authority's understanding of how residents perceive the major improvements that were made and their understanding of how those improvements were paid for. We also hope that they will uncover maybe some new and maybe more effective ways of connecting and communicating with the public on transportation challenges and the promise of cutting-edge transportation technology like connected and automated vehicles. This is a different way of approaching focus groups than we've done in the past, where we've traditionally hosted a focus group in each of the 4 subregions. In this case, only one of the groups, the group targeted at younger residents, kind of cuts across all 4 subregions. Since the focus group research is essentially a listening session to better understand how the public feels about transportation at this moment in time, we're proposing to augment this research with a countywide public opinion survey that would reach approximately 750 residents across all 4 subregions and help give the board more quantitative data in terms of deciding whether to move forward with development of a new transportation expenditure plan. The previously mentioned 5 focus groups will cost approximately $50,000. The additional public research we're proposing this evening also costs approximately $50,000, which means the board has the option to do both within the budget that you approved last month. We plan to bring back the preliminary results from the focus groups to the April board meeting, and if you approve the quantitative research proposal, we would be able to share those results with you at the May board meeting. Staff recommends moving forward with this additional public research to supplement the focus group research. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Start with Janet.
Yes, I don't understand the element that the fact that we're not doing all the areas. When the data comes back, I don't understand how it would tell us overall what we want to do. If we leave out whole corridors in particular, such as West County, so I think it might be if the end game were to figure out why a particular area voted the way it did, or how it might react, that's fine, but it doesn't tell us about the whole. I don't think. How do you? I mean, I don't know what you get out of it in terms of saying these are the issues that are important to our county.
That is part of the reason why staff is proposing that we do some quantitative research that reaches across the whole county to really ask specific questions in each subregion. The way the focus groups were designed are based on what we heard at the board workshop and the last meeting comments from the board publicly about what groups you wanted to hear from, particularly folks that were not fans of the last transportation expenditure plan, younger residents in the county. So that was the direction that the focus groups are being designed for. That's not to say that we can't pivot at this moment in time to change them and host a focus group in each subregion. If that's the direction that the board decides to go, there are some trade-offs we might need to consider because that would require more locations and potentially an additional evening. So that would mean we may have to give up the online focus group of younger residents specifically targeted to them and just include those folks in groups for each subregion.
It would seem to me we could also augment the budget
That
so that it includes all residents so that we have a better sense.
That would be an option to be able to do a focus group in each of the 4 subregions and keep the one specific to younger residents, which is being defined as 39 and younger. And also, and to potentially also do the quantitative poll, it would be approximately $15,000 more.
Okay, Julie.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, along that same line, I feel very strongly we need to do all 4 regions with the standard subdivision that we've always done. I think it's really obvious to many of us that have participated in other elections besides transportation recently in the various regions, and also because of the timing. The property tax bills are due April 10th. People will have those fresh in their mind when we do a poll late April. And my understanding is that particularly in West County, there's a heap of school bonds that are showing up for the first time there based on previous elections. And there are some other elections that have happened in that part of the county that have maybe made some of the folks in that region that traditionally has been understood to approve anything, maybe not quite so willing anymore. And I think we need to hear from them what their issues are. I think each region is going to vary this time, and I think those focus groups are going to tell us what those particular issues are regionally that we will need to address, and so that we understand what their concerns and needs are. I think, frankly, I would rather augment the budget if we can find the money, and continue to do the poll for younger voters, because I think they are going to show up, especially if we're doing an early election next year. They will show up in bigger numbers than they have in the past, given the breadth of the field we'll be looking at. So I think because we can't afford to get this wrong, we have to get as much information up front from the people themselves, talking in conversations, educating them about the language, finding out from them how they talk about these issues before we go to a poll. I think I mentioned at maybe it was a workshop or the last meeting, I don't remember which, that my husband, who knows an awful lot about transportation jargon just from listening to me over the years, he was part of a poll, I think it was probably for RM3, and he was answering questions. It was one of those 20-minute long ones, and he got off the phone and he said, I didn't understand half of what they said, what they were referring to. He didn't understand the language that was used by the pollster. And I think if we want to get real answers, we can't have people guessing at what the answers should be or what the questions even mean. So I feel pretty strongly that we need to do all 4 regions. We need to think carefully about what those conversations in the focus groups should be, and then go to a poll based on that information. And it may be that each region has slightly different aspects of the same kind of questions. So that would be my recommendation. I'd love to hear what the rest of our colleagues have to say, but I don't think we can afford to get this wrong. I think a few extra dollars from somewhere to make sure we get this right and we know what we're talking about and what the public's talking about. We've got SB1 and RM3 that have been voted on since the last time we went out anywhere. We need to know how the mindset has changed, or if it's changed. and what those things are that they want. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand how a poll is conducted. It's a random selection of what have you. But how are the focus groups going to be selected? And before you answer that question, at first I was supportive of this because I understood the reasoning behind it, but I am going to support Commissioner Pierce, and from what I gather, since 50,000 pays for 4, that means they're 12,500 each, although I know the younger one is going to be an online, and that may be less. So I would support adding another, I guess it would be $25,000 to the budget to add those 2 additional groups, West County and Central County. But again, how are the focus groups identified and brought in?
Well, I can tell you how they were planned to have been identified when I came to present here. We were targeting in the southwest area older men, 65 plus.
But how do you do that? Do you do a poll, or do you go online and say if you're interested in participating, or how do you select them?
The research firm that would be doing the research on our behalf, staff is not going to be conducting this on our own.
So there's some sort of process to identify the groups that you want.
Has looked at data from the previous TEP, and based on your discussion, they actually listened to the recording from the last board meeting we had to hear all of your comments and concerns, and parsed out some of the groups that were least receptive to the last expenditure plan, and also took into account your desire to reach out to younger residents in the county. So that was kind of the way the groups were decided, and then they have their own methods for recruiting participants.
And I see Commissioner Newell's light on it, but I don't see any others. So I am going to make a motion, and then if you want to second it, and then further discussion. But I'm going to move that we add the 2 additional geographic groups and add $25,000 to the budget.
Second.
Is 25 enough? That's the only.
Yeah, I would just suggest let them come back. Don't put a dollar specific in there because, but we can do a motion that allows them to do that. We don't have to define the exact amount. That the cost can be at the judgment of them. You know, you could say maybe not to exceed 50,000.
Don't you want to put? Well, I was thinking of putting a ceiling on it, but then I thought. Obviously, they will only spend what they spend, but it just seemed that based on their other, it was 12.5.
Right, but if it's less, my point is, if we do a motion like that and it exceeds that, then they got to come back. So maybe you might want to think about
A budget up to $150,000.
Right.
Okay, I'll amend my motion that we add another $45,000 to the budgeted item.
Not to exceed, and I still second that. I would say I would agree with that. The complexity of trying to come up with a new one is a little bit in limbo because, we're going to find a little bit, I think, is that people believe just a few people I've talked to who just commute. Said, what are you doing for me today because it's still taking me as long? And I passed all these things and they expect things to happen fast. And then you want to have the conversation, well, transportation, I don't care. I'm not going to wait 2 years, 5 years. But I also think people, as the bridge tolls have taken over, and SB1, RM3 is still in litigation, and RM3 is either going to have a $400 million impact to us or $1 billion. The commitment is it's supposed to be $1 billion, but we don't have any guarantees of that. That was the unofficial commitment. That has a lot to do with how we configure a plan, and we got to be honest and transparent. So I think at this point in time, getting as broad a base is probably better. Just what do people think about transportation? I don't think we can actually begin to say exactly what's in there until RM3 gets settled out, because that's a huge amount of money. That could be $1 billion. And if you think about it, we only asked for $2.2 billion in the last round. That's almost half of what we were trying to achieve. Big impact, need to be honest and transparent about it. So Bottom line is, I do agree, and I know we talked a very complicated way of looking at it last time. I think simply stated now, and I think Janet's point, she was going over, and we were looking at tonight, the ballot results area by area. And we need to look at all 4 areas because people perceive the traffic very differently in what those solutions are. And we may find, I'll be honest, that East County may not be ones voting for it. We might find that South County this time, because South County doesn't think they got anything out of the last round. So they may say, well, wow, I'm going to get all this great stuff. And traffic is great on I-4. I'm actually doing more work out there now because it's so easy to get out there and back.
Isn't that wonderful?
It is nice. So anyway, thank you.
I disagree, though. It's terrible, and we need money for it. And who did something like that the other day? And I said, no, you're not good. You nuts. If you're in great shape, who needs it? I think what we're talking about here is a way to get to a transportation expenditure plan. I mean, we're trying to find a way to get there. I still believe, and I did last year, that we need to commit to do what we did, what worked last year was the committee of the whole, and we probably need to form it quick because it's going to start happening much faster than it seemed to happen last year, and we were doing meeting almost weekly at the end between the RTPC. So I hope that we can spend at least a couple minutes on, are we prepared to do the committee of the whole for the expenditure plan? And I will tell you, as the chair that year, nothing was better than bringing Don Tatson in to run those meetings. And I wish you'd consider it because he's already made the connections to people that we needed to support what we were doing after we decided on what we were going to do. So personally, I think even as early as tonight, we need to speak up and say that we are leaning in that direction or not leaning in that direction. Because after we get the money, what good is it if we're not prepared to act?
Karen.
I understand what Commissioner Hudson is saying, but I don't think we can put the cart before the horse. I mean, we're expending money to find out what the public wants, and I think the commitment is there by this board to do the work that's necessary. Lindsay said we'd have the report back of the focus group in April. Maybe we can agendize the conversation at that time about how we want to move forward, even though we won't have the polling back. But the other issue is I hope we don't reinvent the wheel, so to speak. There was a great work group. We came up with a really good expenditure plan. There may need to be some additions, there may need to be some subtractions, but I think that will be based on the information we find out, and that might help us move the process faster. But I wouldn't want to start all over from square one like we did before, other than maybe talking about dollar amounts based on 12, as I say, SB $1 coming in and different things. But I'd like to start with the old expenditure plan and based on the information we find. So maybe at the April meeting we can have that further conversation.
Julie.
Well, I certainly agree. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. On the other hand, there have been a lot of things have changed in the last 2 years. And we've identified some things that we need to work on, and I think the public will probably give us a few more. So I don't think it's too early to start thinking strategically about how we assemble an expenditure plan. I think most of us who were at the workshop the end of January appreciated the leadership and the direction and the ability to kind of pull us together in our discussion that Don exhibited. And I think, you can't ask the chair to do both. And he's done it really, really well for us once. And I would say he would be an ideal consultant to bring on to help with that. We'd have to talk to him and see whether he's even interested for sure, but I suspect that his love of this organization would probably pull him back in for a few months. So I really do think that that's some direction that we could give tonight to have staff explore that idea with Mr. Tatson and bring back a report at the April meeting so that we have an idea of what we might be able to do in that regard and get some idea on compensation and kind of a proposal and that sort of thing. I don't think it's too early to do that. I think by the time we get the information back from the focus groups, we'll have some direction. We'll have more direction by the time we get the poll back in May. And then we need to gear up, and all of us plan to spend a little more time in this room because March is not very far away. And if we decide to go for a ballot measure, it's got to be on the ballot by the beginning of December. It's got to go through the cities and the county before that. So you're backing up to have an expenditure plan done no later than early October. I mean, if you just start backing up those dates, that's what you wind up with. And we've got the summer in the middle. And we're going to have to plan on working through the summer. So anyway, my thought is to give direction to staff to come back with a proposal and work with Mr. Tatson and see if we can get him to give us a hand. Nobody else has the knowledge he does of how this all works.
So Malda, I was going to, well, there you go.
So, Molly, do you need a motion to do
well,
that?
no,
or just
no.
direction? Direction is good enough. Good.
Well, now, that'll be a different motion than the first one.
We don't need
Okay.
a motion for that. If that's the pleasure of the board, we'll just.
But we're not going to vote a first and a second after what we just discussed.
We are on the focus groups, yes.
So we are.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So before we vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this? This is.
Lindsay has a question.
Oh, Lindsay has a question. All right.
With the chair's permission, I just want to recap what I heard as part of the motion and
Okay.
maybe make a suggestion. So I heard that we want to do a focus group in all 4 subregions. We're going to add $45,000 to the previously approved $105,000. I think what would be great to have added to that motion is whether the board does or does not wish to move forward with a quantitative public opinion poll,
Which was the original request. And thank you, Lindsay. All 3, yes. We want to add the 2 other subregions. We want to add the budget of 45 to bring it up to 150, and we want to authorize the poll. Well, that's already in there. We're just adding the west and the central subregions.
And then the final thing, to me, Don Tatson is perfect. He's got the temperament, and he's, yeah. And that's the direction.
Separate
So,
direction under this agenda item.
but it's under this agenda item, so I just kind of wanted to give my 4 cents worth about Mr. Tatson, because I think that'd be great. So with that being said, we'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you, Lindsay. Very good. Item 4.2, Innovate 680, Interstate 680, I-680, Bus on Shoulder Project.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Hisham Naimi. I'm the Director of Programming at the Authority. This item is related to one of several strategies that we will be undertaking, part of Innovate 680. The goal here is to manage congestion, improve mode shift in the corridor, and be prepared for the future. By allowing buses to use the right shoulder during certain conditions, we are hoping to improve express bus efficiency in the corridor, making it more attractive. Back in 2016, we completed a feasibility study of utilizing the freeway shoulder between San Ramon and Walnut Creek as a way to improve travel time reliability in the corridor for buses. The study concluded with minimal improvements, buses could use the right shoulder and save up to 47% of their travel time, or about 13 minutes, in the northbound direction during the PM peak hour. This is not a new concept. Other states like Kansas and Minnesota have been doing this for many years. Buses would use the shoulder when the travel speed in the main travel lanes drops below 30 miles per hour, and buses cannot travel more than 10 miles per hour faster than the adjacent lane. Last year, the authority issued RFP 18-4 to return a consultant to perform all activities necessary to deliver the project to the construction phase. That includes doing the project initiation document, the environmental document, as well as the design plans, as well as getting concurrence from all the stakeholders in the corridor, including the CHP and Caltrans. We received 2 proposals, a panel consistent of CCTA staff, MTC, Caltrans, County Connection, SWAT, and Transpac representatives, reviewed the proposals and interviewed the 2 firms. Kimberly Horn was ranked as the most qualified to do the work based on the criteria detailed in the staff report. We are seeking your authorization today for the chair to execute Agreement 517 with Kimberly Horn in an amount not to exceed $2 million, and to improve a contingency in the amount of $300,000 for a total budget of $2.3 million, and also to delegate the authority to negotiate and execute amendments within the contingency to the executive director. We have Parag Mehta from Kimberly Horn team. He'll be leading the project and managing it on our behalf. All right. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I guess the first question I'm going to ask you, start out with myself. Do we have a timeline for how long this
Yes.
is going to go, in a beginning and kind of an end?
Yes, we'll be starting as soon as the item is approved. We'll be issuing the notice to proceed to Kimberly Horn. We have a 24 months period to complete this work to get all the necessary approvals to start construction. We think construction could start in fiscal year 22.
I just had one question. I'm anxious to get this going. I think it's a great idea. And I just want to clarify, because my memory is a little foggy, I guess, on the specifics. You said that the bus on shoulder would be able to use the shoulder if the traffic in the adjacent lanes drops to 30. I thought it was 35. Maybe I'm mixing that up with motorcycles and lane splitting. Is it 35?
I misspoke. You're actually correct. It's 35 miles per hour.
Awesome. Hey, I'm retaining a little bit. So, okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
She's one of those young ones. She's in that 39 and under group.
Well, here comes a forgetful chair, because we've been discussing this a long time. So I guess the question I would ask, this goes through highway patrol, state, everything. So is that what this is going to encompass, this whole?
Yes, we have to get the concurrence.
Right,
of the
you have to
CHP.
get, see, well, I'm not 25, but I'm, just thought I'd rub it in a little here. So that also will take time just to get answers?
Yes, we have planned several meetings with the CHP to get their concurrence. The good news is that Kimberly Horn, the same team we're selecting today, is doing a similar project in San Diego on the 805.
Right.
So they have talked to the CHP in Southern California already. That project is at least 2 years ahead of us. So they have made great progress there, and we're thinking we have the right team to get us to these approvals.
And then my last statement question, we do have some legislatures who would be on board to help us, do you think?
And Randy can speak to that, yes.
Commissioners, we've had a conversation, Lindsay Willis and I have had a conversation with all of our elected officials along the Interstate 680 corridor, from Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, in her words, love the idea, love the concept. Assemblymember Grayson, love the idea, love the concept. If you remember the last cycle, because the question is, do you need CHP's approval, do you need administrative approval, or law? And so we try to add our pilot project onto an assortment of other bus on shoulder opportunities across the state, and it kind of folded under the weight of all the ornaments on that tree. Plus, the California Highway Patrol still isn't convinced, even though many years ago when I worked for Caltrans, we approved from the director's office administratively through Commissioner Mike Brown a pilot project on Interstate 805 in San Diego. So it's actually been done a couple of times in California, one many, many years ago in District 7, Los Angeles, and then again in District 11. And so we've even checked in with Assembly Chair, Transportation Chair, Mr. Jim Frazier, and we're working our way through that process because he's concerned if CHP is concerned. So we're working all the elected officials along that 680 corridor, and then Senator Glazier as well. There's really the only questions they have is what if there's something in front? Well, if there's something in front, either the driver sees it and or the technology of today sees it, warns the driver, alerts he or she, and they merge back onto the freeway. A majority of 680 is concrete surface. It's auxiliary lane. It's not actually shoulder. And it's better than taking an express bus, moving it all the way across three interstate lanes into the HOV lane, and then you get what they call the snail effect. You're only going to go as fast as that bus in the HOV lane. So if they don't feel comfortable going 85 miles an hour or 70, whatever the number is, down the HOV lane, then they're going to go, let's say, 45. That means you're going to go 45 the entire length of 680 until the vehicle and bus merges over again, three other lanes going the other direction, causing a ripple effect in traffic, and then merge off the freeway ultimately. And so this will allow us to put other technologies in the corridor, safeguard the on-ramp traffic. You're going to have to meter the on-ramps to safeguard the
Quit looking
buses.
at me, Ray.
I'm just trying to look where I need to look.
He just had to throw that out there.
Yeah, so that's. But anyway, things are progressing pretty well. I think Hisham is correct. We have a very good team, an experienced team that has gone through this process, is going through the process again, and we're hopeful that it won't take. Hopefully, it won't take 2 years to get to where we are, where District 11 is.
Yeah, because you should learn from what did you say, San Diego? Is that where you're going to be? Yeah, learn a lot from them and then apply whatever needs to be applied to us up here, okay? Because they're ahead of us by how long?
3 years.
Wow, that's a long time. That's a long time. Okay, any more? Yes.
If I may. I think this is a great idea. There's just a big caution to this. We need to do this in order to test this, and maybe it will apply elsewhere. The real problem is there's not a culture for the 680 corridor to ride buses, right? Bus ridership is dropping like this. So to do all of this, spend a ton of money, and they're empty, and we think, well, the headway will be greater, that'll work. I don't think that's the issue why people aren't riding buses. And I think parallel to this, we need to look at, because the only bus provider on that corridor is County Connection, we need to be working with them really closely. And on a parallel track to figure out what they have to change what they're doing and how they deliver bus services, how they route, the routing system in one respect. Or are we just going to provide this so Google and all of the destination buses, which would not be coming this direction, they'd all be heading south, are we just going to facilitate them? But I think if we think this is a solution, that's going to be the panacea to help. It's a raindrop in the ocean because the ridership is so tiny. I mean, if you look at the per capita cost per bus rider, you would faint how much we're paying for bus service per person. We could give them all Ubers to wherever they want to go, and it would probably be equal. So I just want to make sure that we recognize this is an opportunity to see how to make it work, how to tweak it. We've got some real restrictions on the highway to deal with, and narrowness and drainage. How to change the culture of buses and use this as another way to get people point A to point B. But right now, the delivery system isn't working. And some say, well, the headway is wrong. Well, it's not. The destination buses, their ridership are going up, right? Even Bishop Ranch's, theirs, they go point A to point B, they're going up in ridership. So I just want to make sure, however we do it, I know we're talking to them, but I think it's pretty serious conversation to figure out how to change it.
Kevin, you had your light on a long time.
Yeah, I was just searching some clarification. So we're looking at 2 years to get permission, and then starting in 2021, 2022?
Most likely, yes.
Okay. 2 years for, okay.
Wait a minute. Man, when you said 2 years, I flashed back to a League of California Cities policy committee that I was on, that a certain person who was a teenager then too, was working on something for whatever with the CHP, and at the end of 2 years, they just said, no. I mean, do we think we're getting this? I mean, is it just we're working on something for 2 years? Is that even answerable or?
We meet their standards, William.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Can I follow up on his question so Randy can answer? I mean, basically, and I appreciate Kevin's, are we going to be working for 2 years to get permission before we begin the study? Or is it all wrapped into one? I think that's what you're asking.
It's all wrapped into one. I mean, we will be starting meeting with the CHP the next month, basically in April. And we want to understand from them their concerns, and we're going to try to address them as we move forward with the project. At any point in the process, if we find out that there is no way to satisfy the CHP, we need to elevate the issue or take a different route, we'll definitely come back and inform you of our progress. The project is, I failed to mention this earlier, there is a policy advisory committee formed to manage this project as well as other projects, part of Innovate 680, which many of you will be on it, as well as a technical advisory committee, which will be getting frequent updates on where we are in the process and providing us with policy directions.
Let me ask you, so you point out exactly correctly. So this pilot project's peak hour only, AM, PM. It's not all day long, all night long. And so it's going to deal with commute traffic from the BART station at Walnut Creek to Bishop Ranch. And so as the ridership's going up, there's not enough buses, and they're not reliable enough. And so the idea is, in cooperation with County Connection, when we get approval, they're going to put more buses as express buses, so it's one stop. There was Clay Callum wrote an article about how many hours it took him to get to have dinner with his wife in San Ramon. If he does a peak hour AM in the morning direction, he's probably going to get there faster. There'll be breakfast for him. Yeah, and PM is going in the wrong direction. But the point is, we're trying to get more people in buses on a route that's already performing. What is it? The 93X, 95, 94, something X. Anyway, those buses, they're high performance, and they point A to point B. That's it, and it's going to be faster. So that's the pilot.
I'll move the item.
Before we move it, public is, yes, ma'am. This is public comments
Hi.
on item 4.2.
Yes. Chris Kelly, City of Hercules. I also serve on WestCat and WICTAC with Tom and with Janet. I tell you, I'm chomping at the bit for something like this. I would love to have something like this on Highway 80. You know, we're jam-packed. Our buses slow down to like 20 miles an hour. WestCat just added 3 double-decker Lynxes. AC Transit has them now. We need something like this. And so we're looking to this Bush on Shoulder project on 680 as an example of something that we could really use in our urban corridor. And I always contend that if people who are driving to work, like I'm driving now from Hercules to Embryville in the morning, if I can see buses go by really, really fast when I'm stuck in 10-mile-an-hour traffic, and I am an office worker, an able-bodied person, then I'll find a way to hop on that bus and get to where I need to go. So I think it's a fabulous idea, and it has an example for the rest of us in other parts of the Bay Area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? All right. We do have a first from Karen.
I'll second. Give it to Kevin.
Kevin,
Give it to Kevin.
you got voice there. We have a first and a second. Any more discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Resounding ayes. We're going to 4B5, outcomes from 5 planning directors seminars. Smiled. You act like this is a horrible thing.
All that talk about traffic, it really got me down.
Oh, obviously.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning at CCTA, and I'm here tonight to present to you outcome of a series of meetings that we had with the planning directors for Contra Costa County, and also all of the transportation managers.
Bob, if I could, I'd just like to move this.
Second. No, go let him go ahead.
All right.
Maybe what that was
He
an
saw it at
attempt
the
to
plan.
tell you,
Make it
move it very fast. How's that?
All right. So in our countywide plan that you adopted in 2017, we decided it'd be a good idea to kind of retool our planning procedures and take a close look at the growth management program in view of all the things that are changing, SB 743, the 3 revolutions, electric vehicles, connected and autonomous vehicles, and ride-hailing services. And so we decided to have 5 seminars over the course of a year and bring in keynote speakers for each one. And we hope that the planners and managers from the cities would come to this. We got a very good attendance from around the county. So seminar 1 was about emerging technologies and how that will affect our future. Seminar 2 was about new regulatory requirements and new laws that are going to affect how we measure congestion. And seminar 3 was giving what we've learned about new technologies and regulatory requirements. What metrics should we use to measure our transportation system? The 4th one was about growth management. We've had that system in place since 1988, and is it time to retool that? And the 5th was, given what we learned from the first 4, how do we move on into the future? So very quickly, the first seminar had Professor Dan Sperling from UC Davis to talk about all of the new technologies, and we had breakout sessions with all of the planning directors, and they talked about the discussion topics shown here and tried to think of outcomes from these new technologies. For the second one, we brought in Chris Ganson from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. He's actually overseeing this whole shift from level of service to vehicle miles traveled. And his beliefs are that it's going to improve livability and reduce congestion and reduce pavement maintenance costs and so forth. And so we tried to figure out how that would affect us in the future, since much of what we do with Measure C is still based on level of service and delay. Seminar 3, the keynote speaker was James Corliss from SACOG. And he has been doing a lot of work on how we measure our goals, and he's come up with all kinds of cool new dashboards that we were introduced to. And we had, again, discussions in breakout groups to talk about the impacts of these things and how we could change our goal setting. 4 was focused on the growth management program. The speaker was Robert Liberty from the Institute for Sustainable Solutions at Portland State University. He has studied growth management not only across the United States but around the world. He has some very interesting studies about urban limit lines and possibilities that they help within the area, but they also can lead to some leapfrogging outside of the area. And finally, we brought back Ellen Greenberg. She is now the Deputy Director for Sustainability at Caltrans. And she spoke a lot about things that have happened since we adopted the growth management program. And you'll recall when we did that back in the early 90s, we didn't really talk as much about certain things that we talk about today, like equity, health, obesity, climate change, housing, MOS. aging demographics, and public spaces. So all of these things she brought in, and we talked about how we could interlink those with our growth management program. So the basic themes that came out, were innovation. We have to prepare for it. SB 743, we have to shift to vehicle miles traveled. And we really need to broaden our MTSOs, our multimodal transportation service objectives, to get out of the level of service, congestion and delay business and get into vehicle miles traveled. And then a fourth question kind of came up, and that is how do we change things? How do we implement change? And that's one of the more difficult challenges. So the conclusion for Contra Costa is we're on the right track, and that we've been studying where we need to go, and we have some good ideas. Definitely modifications are needed in both the short term and the long term. And things that are changing out there are definitely going to affect the way we plan. And as Randy Usaki always says, good planning makes for good projects. So we have to think about where we're going to be in the year 2050, given all these changes. There's some immediate steps that we can take. For example, the transition from level of service to VMT. We can certainly improve our dashboards so that we can see how we're doing with all of our objectives and measurements. We want to improve the GMP process. There were some complaints about still having a checklist and still doing it by hand, and we could certainly streamline that process. And then the whole focus on priority development areas brought up discussion about assisting local jurisdictions with their infill development projects. So all of this is going to feed into our future implementation actions. We have to do another countywide transportation plan down the road. This affects our congestion management program, our bicycle and pedestrian plans, all the things on the right side of this chart. And with that, that concludes my presentation. We're going to take all the things we learned here and carry them forward into a work plan for the planning section for 2019 and 2020. This also affects somewhat your expenditure plan. If you think about it, do you want to retool your growth management program at all? And if you do, we have to think about the schedule for that.
Is there anyone from the public wishing to chat about this? All right, we'll move the board. Tom.
This sounds like it has some similarities to the retreat we had out here. Were there a lot of similarities, and if so, did you get any significantly different feedback from staff people versus us electeds?
There definitely were some similarities in that we were trying to talk about the future and how we have to change in the future. I think the big difference here is, of course, you as board members have a much broader view and a higher view, and we were dealing with the frontline people at the building desks and the folks that have to do EIRs, and so they were looking at it possibly more from a process standpoint than from an overall policy standpoint. And so I think at our board retreat we got some really good feedback on overall policy.
Next meeting, but you're going to do something. Right, I got him.
Okay.
Next meeting, when you're going to do more
We're going to have a work plan.
You're going to have a work plan.
That it'll be 2 meetings from now. Yeah.
So in May.
No.
Martin, thanks. That was actually a very concise report. I guess just the out loud concern, and I get VMT, that while we have legislation that is using it, and it's a new tool, it's a new way to look at transportation, it's a tax tool, right? I mean, VMT has to come out. They need it for the new tax bases because SB1 will evaporate. And as we switch to other fuel sources and stuff, so we won't be using gas, right? That is only for gasoline-driven things. So VMT is going to be a way to do vehicle license registration. It's going to be how to assess everything based on how far you travel. But we still have to keep in mind that the voters voted for a certain list of projects, and we still have to be true to what those are for this expenditure plan. But clearly going forward, and our new one should be that vision, and it's, it has, hopefully would have significant environmental positive impacts under a VMT modeling system. But I think we still have to be a little cautious that we have a commitment to the voters to what there, and we don't have the authority to unilaterally say, well, we're going to come up with a new rule and the solution is going to be different and we're going to build a different project. But I guess I should say, given how long it takes to do things in transportation, I guess we'll be okay by the time we implement this. We'll be done with this one and we'll be on the next. But anyway, just a little caution. It's a taxing tool. It's its real goal. I get that. It doesn't make me excited that this is the great environmental tool that it ought to be. It's really being pushed for tax purposes to come up with a new way to get taxes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really very informative. And when I saw the growth management up there, and I appreciate your cautionary comment, Julie and Dave and I, and then a lot of others of you, including Amy, are very aware of what's going on relative to the discussions around housing. And I believe there will be a movement to look at our urban limit line. There are conversations out there around the Bay Area that we need to start looking, we meaning society, not we government yet, because as Newell just mentioned, it hasn't been voted on. But I do think that that will be a big issue moving forward, and I think I see a clash myself between open space advocates, which we all like, versus the need to add additional housing, and at least around where those boundaries currently are. I'm not saying get rid of the whole urban limit line, but there will be strong forces that do that. So I appreciated your comment on growth management, because we may be looking in the future, whenever that is, at a total restructuring of what growth management means and how we have to address that. So I'm not surprised by it, but again, I was mentioning before our meeting to some of our members, and I'll mention it to the listening audience, please take the time to read Dan Walter's op-ed today on what state legislators feel they need to do, because even though the voters may have voted for something, some state legislators believe that they need to do something else. It's a very informative column, and I think a lot of us are feeling those concerns and pressures. Thank you.
All right. I see this as a action item, so versus receive a report. So we have a motion that we receive the report. I have a first. I have a second. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
We're forwarding this to the TCC,
Right.
Is that right?
That's correct.
To begin working on developing guidance for implementation of SB 743 and evaluation of recommendations for improving the Measure J GMP.
That took care of it. Randy, any discussion on that? Oh, okay. Then we'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Correspondence, communication, associate committee reports. Generally, we have them on our dais here. Commissioners, staff reports.
Commissioners, I predicted 7:15 for a close time, so it's right at 7:15.
Whoa.
So you get your brownie points.
Okay.
So I want to make it go over.
All right, Julie's going to make a comment.
I have to give a report. As your delegate to the California Association of Councils of Government on behalf of CCTA, I will tell you that we had a joint annual conference this year with the Local Government Commission. We decided that since we're always on competing weekends and people can't go to both, we decided to have them together. Tom Butt was there, Local Government Commission. There were quite a few of us there, and in our different respective areas. I think it was really a dynamic a group this time, bringing together some different opinions than are held at either one of our individual sessions. I will tell you, we had some fascinating reports. And I will have staff send you the link to the website where all of the presentations are going to be posted. One in particular was a presentation by the mayor of West Sacramento, and talking about how they have changed to bus on demand. And they have got people riding the bus that never would have thought about it. They're servicing people. They're able to pick them up practically at their doorstep. And it's really tremendous. Their bus ridership is growing and they're spending less money. And so it was a fascinating, he's a really dynamic speaker. Might be fun to just have him come down and give us a quick presentation, because he's very animated and it gets you excited. He had some really great graphics to share with us and to tell us about what they're doing, looking to the future of transportation there. And most of us have seen the city of West Sacramento and how it's grown. And as we go up to the Capitol, we drive right by it. It's pretty impressive what they have done and what they're accomplishing. So anyway, it was a really, really good conference, and I will make sure you all get access to all of those presentations. There were some really, really good, it was intense. We're a little brain weary when we got done, but you couldn't ask for a better location, so it was good. So just had to report out that thank you for sending me.
Okay. Commissioners, ex officio representatives, any comments? Well, moving on. I know you're over your 2 minutes, but you have to say something.
Commissioners, I only have two things to say tonight. The first one is I gave a talk to Governing Technology Magazine because another governing technology person asked me how things were going on a phone call because they wanted some information on something else. And he was asking me what's going on at CCTA, and I started talking about our reduction in paper, how it's transformed our construction program. He couldn't figure that out. And so Skip DeSant called me, and he said, what is this whole thing on POP, progress on paperless? And I said, well, we bought a lot of paper, and so we've made it a point to reduce paper. So we asked for the agenda, so if you still get a paper agenda, and I'm a paper user, so I apologize. I'm part of the problem, not part of the solution, but a lot of you are part of the solution. So we've reduced the amount of paper, like over 50%. I said 70%. We're still trying to get the exact number, but it's somewhere, it's a good amount of paper. But in order to do that, Terry Ann had to go and say, well, Randy, we can eliminate more paper if we get electronic signatures. So we went through the electronic signature process. And so then we said, well, if we got electronic signatures, we can end up writing change orders automatically. We can do online bidding because we have, so this thing has cascaded into this article about an agency in California trying to go paperless and all the ramifications and all the innovations. The reason why I tell you that is because Apple called. So Apple, this small company down in Cupertino, said, hey, Randy, you guys are using iPads right away. They said, why are you using iPads? Well, we like either one. We're technology agnostic, but these are lighter. They're not as heavy as a Surface Pro. And so our inspectors can go out and they get 3 times more information because they're shooting a bunch of pictures, they're talking to it. It writes the information down, not like the old days when you used to have to write it and type it. And so we're seeing this big innovation program, and what it's designed to do is lower risk. If you lower risk for a contractor, you get a better bid. So if you're in a city or a town, you're lowering risk, you're going to get a better bid on all your work. That's our goal. And so it's been a really interesting path to have gone from POP program to now talking to Apple, which is one of the highest valued companies. And
Will they give us free iPads for it now because you're publicizing it?
So I had
The county uses them, they don't give us free, but maybe they can come up here and have a satellite office. That's what
we're looking. So one of the proposals is to go to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and give every entry-level freshman an iPad so they get used to the technology because that's the direction they're going. So maybe something for my alma mater. And lastly, on the last part of this discussion, because I'm over my time, is we held the 5th annual Redefining Mobility Summit. And it's every year we say, that's it, we're not doing it again. Lindsay, every year, Lindsay says we're not going to do it again. So I opened this statement by saying we're not going to do this again. And everybody's going like, what, you're not going to do it again? And at the end we announced we're going to do it again. But the first panel of the day was International Women's Day. And so our first panel had a lady that I had invited from Australia to fly out and give a 15-minute update on what's happening in Australia. Our keynote speaker was Anushe Ansari, the first private woman astronaut in space, and talked about innovation. So it was a very well received. And Commissioner Arnerich was there at the end because we had a Shark Tank, and through the proceeds of the sponsorships, we were able to carve out $10,000 to the winner. And so Route Reports is the company, the startup company that won that Shark Tank award. And I wasn't a judge. It was Ms. Ansari, the A3 Ventures CEO from AAA, that's their investment arm, Habib Shamsku, and the person from I Ventures in San Ramon, the FinTech. So it was a very good panel, a very fair panel. So ultimately, we got a lot of good comments, including from Mr. Campbell saying it's the best redefining mobility summit he's been to yet. Is that correct, sir? Yeah. Now, why did you add that? You spoiled it. You spoiled it right there. I mean, we learned a lot. So it was a great. So I wanted to close on a high note. It was very well received, and hopefully Lindsay will work hard on it next year.
Last one in California.
All right. Yes, good job. Calendar, we all have it right attached, and we will adjourn till April 17th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Thank you very much, and 8 minutes over Randy's time. Still good.